In a world where rulers do whatever it takes to hold on to power, the news of a Messiah was certainly cause for alarm. At this point of the story, the danger of being the child of promise becomes quite evident. Now, if you're keeping score, you may have noticed that we're jumping out of order a bit in the narrative this Sunday. In Matthew's Gospel, as we've simply just heard our gospel lesson, the Magi had already visited Herod in Jerusalem, and they had already seen Jesus, offered the gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh, and had already returned home by another way. Now, we aren't skipping the Magi this year. Don't worry, we will sing We Three Kings next Sunday. But today, we pick up at the point of the story where Herod realized that the Magi were not coming back, that they were not going to tell him where he could find Jesus, and that he had been tricked by the Magi. Realizing that there was a real threat to his power roaming around somewhere, but he wasn't sure where, Herod, as we've heard, took the most drastic step to try to eradicate the Messiah. He ordered that all the boys under 2 years old be killed. If you can't get the one, take them all. That's a horrific story, and a reminder that good news is often accompanied by backlash and harm-filled action from those who cannot handle good news. There's plenty to hone in on in this story, but I want to focus on one detail that has been recurring throughout the stories that we've heard for the last several weeks through Advent and now in this season of Christmas. Each of these beloved narratives is moved along by characters who are sustained and guided by dreams, natural signs, and embodied ways of knowing. Over and over and over again, it keeps happening. It was so common that it surprised me when I thought every story has a dream or a natural sign or some embodied way of knowing. Zechariah, who became the father of John the Baptist, had a dream where he was told the news that Elizabeth, his wife, would bear a child. Mary, of course, had her own dream, letting her know that she too would have a child of promise. When Mary visited Elizabeth, after both of them had received this news, John leapt in Elizabeth's womb at being in the presence of the child in Mary's womb. Elizabeth's way of responding was this embodied way of knowing, and she experienced the nearness of the good news. Joseph had a dream. It kept him from throwing Mary out on her own, and also that he was to name the child Jesus. As we heard here on Wednesday evening, on Christmas Eve, the shepherds were visited by an angel during a nighttime vision in which they were instructed where they would find Jesus. The Magi, these astrologers from afar, followed a natural sign, a star in the sky, and it led them to the child. It was a dream that told them to go home by another way as well. And as we have heard today in these litany of dreams and natural ways of knowing and signs in nature, Joseph had two more dreams. One where he was instructed to leave, head to Egypt with their family. As we know, Herod was about to undertake this large-scale plan of taking care of Jesus, removing Jesus. And then after Herod died, as the Holy Family was in Egypt, Joseph had another dream as he was instructed it was safe to return home at this point. Note the contrast here between Caesar, who moves the story, as we heard Wednesday night, by taxing people and building his empire, and Herod, as we will hear next week, who, in his paranoia, uses the means of death to secure power. But the characters at the center of this new thing that God was doing in the world are moved by dreams, following the signs that they see in the sky, and listening to the joy that emerged from within their bodies. That contrast, though, makes me wonder how fragile this good news is, that these ways of knowing seem too insignificant for a story that is this important. And yet, these are such common features of the way that Jesus came into the world that we ought not pass over them too quickly. We ought to give them some time. I know that as we gather here and as we gather online today, we're nearing the end of another year. We're still in the times when across the globe there's a movement towards authoritarianism. Authoritarians seeking to move the dials of history through control and violence. But we are still called to seek the one who comes in humility and gentleness, the one whose plans are revealed through dreams, through paying attention to what's happening in nature, and through what we can experience and feel in these bodies. At the precipice of this new year, I suspect we approach this time in many different kinds of ways. Maybe you set out this time of year to do all the healthy and good things that slipped in the course of this last year. Is that anybody in the room? Be honest, be honest. All right, we got a few of those. Maybe there's a new sense of possibility as a new year is emerging. Any resolution setters in the room? Anybody still make resolutions? Yeah, good. Maybe a new year seems like just another set of days that will follow and be just like the ones that have gone before. However we experience it, it's wise for us to remember the ways that God reveals what God is doing in the world. The ways God invites unlikely characters from the margins to the center of the story. One of the practices that we have sought to prioritize here at St. Paul's over the last few years has been the work of discernment. We don't always say that's what we're doing, but we try to discern a lot. And really at the heart of it, that's simply a fancy way of saying we're trying to pay attention to what God is saying, what God is calling us to do in our own time and in this place. Discernment is important for us as individuals, but it's crucial for us as we consider what God is calling us to do and to be together. So over the last few years, we've had town halls where we want to hear one another well. And almost every time that our church council meets, which is monthly, we take time to notice areas where it seems like things are going well, or the language we've used is, where is the way opening? We also pay attention to the places where it feels like things are stuck, or where the way is closing. It's also why I long to hear your ideas and your thoughts. It's why we're going to restart the roundtable preaching team in early 2026 to ensure that we have more and more places to continue to hear well the ways that God is speaking to us still. It's the reason in meetings, and I know some of you don't like this, but we say, what are you feeling in your gut at the end of this meeting? And we try to call ourselves out of our heads every once in a while so we can experience in a different kind of way. That's why we pay attention to the places where we experience tension in the course of a meeting, because that's probably when the most interesting things are happening. The fact of the matter is that God is still speaking. And in this year to come, when it seems like the stakes get higher and higher with each year, the world needs some people who are listening, who are paying attention to the dreams that they have, and are listening to what their body is experiencing, and are paying attention to the signs that are unfolding around us. This is the work of prayer. It's the work of being intentional. It's lovingly paying attention, listening in for the ways that God is speaking. There was a campaign in the early 2000s from our siblings in the United Church of Christ, the UCC. About the same time that every Methodist was telling someone about our open hearts, our open minds, and our open doors, the UCC had hired their own consultant to come up with a campaign in which they proclaimed, "God is still speaking." I remember there was I was living in Spencer, Iowa at the time, and I would go up to the lakes, and there was a church that I would pass by that had a large sign on the side of their building saying, "God is still speaking." And I felt this deep sense of hope every time I saw that little sign. Indeed, God is still speaking. As we celebrate the new thing that God has done in the world in Jesus, and the new things that God still seeks to do, I hope that we will commit in this new year. You can call it a resolution, you can call it whatever you would like, to move slowly enough to get enough sleep that we have some time to dream. And may we have our hearts, our ears, our minds, and our doors opened far enough that we can still hear a God who still has something to say. May it be so. Amen.